Hello CIS25. In this video, I'm going to go over Chapter 2, Materials, which covers networking. In this chapter, it talks about network protocols, network ports, how to be able to work with the network in the area of computer maintenance and repair. And I'm also going to go over the Unit 2 assignment. So while you're watching this video, it would be best if you have the notes document and the assignment document open at the same time. So in the chapter, it begins with talking about the protocols, what the protocols would be. So protocols are ways for the devices to be able to communicate using services and port. Because we have different devices that are produced by different manufacturers, the industry has to establish some form of protocol so that way all the devices can communicate. So it is a set of formal standards and policy, which are rules and procedures and formats that define communication between two or more devices, what we would consider a network. And it would conduct the action, policies, and affairs from end to end, which allows you to be able to manage data, transfer data, and establish communication in a network. And so for the assignment, when you look at the assignment, it asks you to define network protocols. You can find that on page 1 of our notes. Network protocols include standards and policy for system communication to establish services. Services could be acquiring web pages when you're using your browser. So the network interface card is going to be able to transmit signal for connection. Your system will be able to take that request and send it forward via the network interface card through the cable, through the internet service provider, and to the destination system, which could be a web server if you're looking at someone using a web browser to visit a website. And in that case, we would then use port 80. So each of these services are assigned a port number, which is a value that pertains to a certain service. So in the notes for the second area, it talks about network port. It is a process specific or an application specific software that's serving the communication endpoint. And in our current network, in internet in general, and our local area network, we would then use TCP, which stands for Transmission Control Protocol, and IP, which is Internet Protocol. And TCP protocol gives us the advantage in that the communication has to be established in order for the data transmission to occur. In that, it would have acknowledgement between the source system and the destination system. The IP, which is Internet Protocol, it's used for addressing in and outside of the network. So starting with your computer would have an IP address. It's either version 4 or version 6. And this IP address is used to be able to identify which system is transmitting the data from and what address is the destination system that would be used so the data can reach the appropriate target. Another protocol that is mentioned in the chapter is going to be the user datagram protocol, which is UDP. UDP is often used also for data transmission. Things that you would experience using UDP would be watching a video online, listening to internet radio. So UDP, unlike TCP, it does not have the complete connection acknowledgement. It would just be receiving or sending as soon as the system is transmitting data. So UDP compared to TCP, it doesn't guarantee and it's not reliable. So a port is a communication endpoint. It's a value that we are given to a number, and there are 2,000 common ports that are used for networking. Some specific servers are given a port number. Like I said, HTTP would be port 80. And if you're using HTTPS, which is Hypertext Transfer Protocol, secure, those type of websites uses port 443. So a port is also defined as a logical construct that identifies a specific process or a type of service. So if we're looking at other type of service like Telnet, which is given the port 22, or DNS, or Dhcp, and so on. So these particular services are designed for a certain purpose, and they're given a certain port number. Ports are always going to be related to each protocol, and the address combination by 16-bit unsigned number is known as your common port number. So on the first page of your note, I listed the common ports that you would see that would tie to the common services that we use in a network. If you are using file transfer protocol, which is port 20, that will be FTP, and FTP also use port 20 and 21 for send and receive. For secure shell SSH, that uses port 22, and Telnet, which is an older protocol that is less secure compared to the newer protocol SSH. Telnet is a way that we can remotely log into a service using unencrypted text message that uses port 23. If you're using mail server, you would then use Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, SMTP. This is used for email routing. So when a user is accessing an email server to send and receive email, that would then uses port 25. DNS services uses port 53, and so on. So you can see that it's listed on the page 1 is a table, and that gives you the common port number. Why is this important? You might have to help users set up email on their mobile devices or on their system, which use a certain protocol, and that protocol is tied to a service and a port number. In cybersecurity and networking, port, protocols, and addresses are very important. That would be able to help us narrow down the type of service, the source, the destination system, and the type of data that system is transmitting. So I highly recommend you take a look at the table and you'll become familiar with the ports that are commonly used in a network. So going back to the assignment, for question number 2, it asks you, Juanita uses a browser to access a website on the internet. Which common port is used for the website accessing the browser, or the website access on the browser? This would be port 80, and that is HTTP. HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. That's what's used to be able to serve you the web page that you see, the website that you actually request when you're using the browser. So the answer for number 2 would be HTTP port 80. For question number 3, which protocol is collecting and organizing information about managed device on an IP network? That will be Snmp. And if you refer to the first page of our note, you will be able to find out information about Snmp. So on page 2, you would see that Snmp is a simple network management protocol. This is used to collect, organize information about managed network on an IP networks, and for modifying the information to change the device behavior. So overall network management, we would then use Snmp. Many devices, like a managed switch, would then use Snmp. It allows us to see which devices are on the network, which devices are sending and requesting information. So, and Snmp uses port 161 and 162. For number 4, it asks you, when an administrator implements Windows Active Directory AD role, which allows a user to log into the network using an authentication method such as username and password, which protocol is implemented to support the Active Directory role on the server? And Active Directory is fully related to Windows Server operating system. This is used as a database to manage objects, users, systems that belong to that network that needs to be authenticated. And Active Directory uses a protocol called Lightweight Directory Access Protocol. This is known as Ldap. And with this protocol, the server would then be able to provide user access through authentication. So when a user logs into a system that belongs to a network, that username and password, or whichever method that user authenticates to, it could be a USB token, a password, or biometrics, would then reference what is stored inside the Active Directory. So that user needs to be first exist in Active Directory in order to access the network. And with Active Directory, it would then use Lightweight Directory Access Protocol. So after the table that you would see on page 1 and page 2, which lists the common port and its protocol. And as you can see also that these protocols can be in either TCP or UDP or both. So they are categorized under either UDP or TCP or both. Earlier I mentioned that TCP stands for Transmission Control Protocol. These are known as connection-oriented sessions. So when we use the internet or when we use the network currently, we would use Transmission Control Protocol. To establish this session, it needs to be fully connected. So that way there would be acknowledgement before the data is being transmitted. And with TCP IP network, the data is held within what's called a packet. Each of the packet would then be able to include the source, where the data is coming from, the destination, where the data is going to, and also to be able to check to see if that packet can arrive to the appropriate target. If the receiving computer doesn't receive the packet, it cannot assemble the message and it must ask the sending system to retransmit, or it would notify the transmission system. So within the packet, the data when it's being sent is going to be disassembled. Raw data is not in the order how it's intended to be received. Once the system received the packet, after it acknowledged the communication through connection, the data would then be reassembled based on the header, the trailer, and the body of the data. So in that sense, we can say that no packet is going to be left behind. So therefore, TCP is reliable, it's ordered, it does error checking in the delivery process, and between the applications with the running host and the communication via IP network. So my analogy for this would be, it's like receiving a package in the mail. So some package would just be dropped off in the front of your house, that will be UDP. Other package that will require a signature a verification that you are the recipient of that package before the delivery person hand you the package. So TCP makes sure that that is the right destination, and once that communication, the connection is established, the packet would then be delivered. Once it's being delivered, the system would then reassemble the information or the data that's arriving in that packet in order. So that way everything would be put in place and you would have the appropriate data at the end. So compare TCP to UDP, we would see that TCP, because it's connection oriented and it's reliable, there would be a little bit higher in latency, or the time that we would wait, compared to UDP. So UDP tends to be used for something that would be faster, something that would be streaming over the internet. So streaming services would often use user datagram protocol compared to transmission control protocol, which takes longer time. So under the TCP IP suite, you would see other listed protocol such as Secure Socket Layer, or SSL, and DNS, and so on. So under each of the category, you would see various protocol that's being applied under the suite. There are three-way handshake that happens with TCP. So it would first acknowledge that the transmission can occur after the connection is established. If there is not connection, it would try to reestablish the connection and retransmit. If there, for some reason, it cannot establish the retransmission, it would then detect the error and notify the systems. So therefore, we would then see the reliability, but like I said, that will increase the latency in the network. The following section talks about user datagram protocol. And in this, what we would see is that it is connectionless. That means that it doesn't have to establish full connection before it sends. The messages are sent without an expectation of communication from the receiver, and UDP does its best in sending the message, and it does not notify the system if it doesn't receive. So errors are not accounted for. UDP provides what's called a checksum of data integrity, and it uses port number for addressing in different functions from the source to the destination based on the datagram. There is no handshake that happens with UDP. Thus, the user program is unreliable, but we do have faster communication and data transmission using UDP. Something that you can also find with UDP is voice over IP. So when you are making phone call using internet connection, you are using UDP. Or when you're gaming, a lot of the game streaming server system utilize the UDP and its related ports to be able to give you the response, also with DNS and other type of services. In the following section, it talks about FTP, and FTP stands for File Transfer Protocol. It can be used on browser or a specific type of program to be able to transfer file between servers and client systems. So there are existing FTP sites. Some are public and some are private. Some FTP site would require credential. That means that the system or the user needs to be able to log in. Other FTP sites does not require username or password or login credential, and that would be considered unsecure. The ones that use credential would be secure. And under the FTP, there is FTPS, which is Secure File Transfer Protocol, and it uses slightly different port in that it would then require authentication encryption in the file transfer compared to regular FTP. An example of FTP is your FileZilla, and you can visit filezilla-project.org. This provides file transfer, and this server exists for a long time. So going back to the assignment, it continues to ask you about different protocols, starting with some mail protocol. For question number 5, it asks you which common port is used for POP3. And POP3 is a protocol that is used for webmail. POP stands for Post Office Protocol. Version 3 is POP3. And this particular protocol uses port number 110. So whenever you're using Gmail, Hotmail, Outlook.com, and other type of webmail, you would then utilizing POP3. Question 6 asks you, Felix has an old computer that runs Windows 2000. He wants to connect the system to his home network, which consists of newer systems. What protocol allows Felix Windows 2000 system to be visible to the network? That will be Netbios. Netbios is used to resolve system connection by system name. Back in the day, we didn't have a way to really maximize how we would now use IP addresses to be able to connect system to the network. So back then, we would then be able to identify the system name and be able to allow it to connect. And Netbios is the protocol that allows you to do that. In all systems, mostly Windows system, you would see that Netbios protocol still exists. This still allows us to be able to utilize the older technology in order to connect our system. So more details on these protocols are listed on the subsequent pages of your notes, starting with page 3. And here it also talks about SSH. SSH is known as Secure Shell. This allows system to exchange data using secure channel. The protocol that is more secure than FTP is your SSH, and SSH is more secure than Telnet. So, in order to remotely connect to a system, you would then use SSH, and SSH use port 22. So then, can you use secure FTP in place of SSH? Sure you can, but secure FTP is only designed to do file transfer, compared to SSH allows you to remotely connect along with be able to utilize and send the data at the same time. Telnet is a way that we would connect to the system remotely, and it is using unencrypted text. Telnet is not recommended to be enabled in a network as it would have a vulnerability. So you would then turn off the Telnet service for your network, and it usually is by default with most network appliances and security appliances nowadays. But in the case where if it is enabled, you want to disable it because it does impose security issues. So using Telnet, you would then need to be able to acquire a key for the session, and with this key it would establish secure transmission in SSH, compared to Telnet. SMTP, we talked about that, and DNS it stands for Domain Name Systems. This is used to be able to name network and servers on the internet that translate to domain name, and that would tie back to the IP address. So whenever you would see www.comptia.org, that would then translate to a public address that is designated for that domain name server. And individual host name that would correlate to the IP addresses, so that each server is using a public IP, and this public IP is being serviced or maintained by IANA along with its DNS. So all the domains out there that you see, all the websites that you see, is registered, and it would then correlate with a public IP address. And those systems would then use domain name system. DNS is usually correlated with also web server. So along with DNS, in order for website to be able to serve you the page, the task that you acquire for application purposes, you would then use web services. And DNS uses port 53. With that, we previously touched on HTTPS, which is HTTP secure, Hypertext Transfer Protocol secure. It is different than your HTTP, and HTTP is a protocol that the web browser uses to be able to access the content of websites. HTTP uses port 80 and HTTPS uses port 443. In the previous question, we saw it asked about POP3. POP3, you can find it on the bottom of page 4. Post Office Protocol version 3. This is used for your webmail in order to download the mail that you would see in inbox, and to be able to use it, you would then use this POP3. So POP3 is not suitable for people who are frequently switch computers and mobile devices, as it would then require additional configurations with the received mail. But all the newer devices, you're able to sync your content, everything via the server. So you would then be able to utilize some of the webmails across the devices. User who use POP3 server can retrieve mail, and it also use SMTP to send messages. So to retrieve, it would then use POP3. To send, it would then use Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, SMTP. Your IMAP is your Internet Message Access Protocol. This enables the message to remain on the email server, so that way they can be retrieved in any location. And whenever that you are looking at your inbox, your sent folder, all of that is stored on the server. And IMAP supports folder structure, so you can organize your mail and mail messages. So IMAP 4 is the current version of the IMAP, and it would be based on your account, which is tied to your credential to the mail server. Now, your username and password would then be required for you to be able to access these folders, known as your inbox, your sent, your drafts, and so on. The server uses SSL for the communication that would be secure socket layer, and IMAP uses port 143. We previously talked about Netbios, and Netbios is used for legacy application that was made in 1980s in order for the system to be connected to the network. And so it's designed to be able to resolve system name instead of IP addresses. Following that, it goes over Smb Cifs. This is known as your server message block, Smb. This is used to share items such as files and printers. So whenever you share printers with your family members at home, it uses Smb. And it uses packets to authenticate remote systems, known as the inter-process communication mechanism. Smb uses port 137 to 139, and it, in legacy-wise, it sends traffic over Netbios, and also port 445 that's hosted on the TCP. So on the older network, it would use port 137 to 139, and on the TCP suite network, it would then use port 445. Port 445 is also known as the CIFS. This is a way for us to be able to share files across intranets and internet. You would then also have cross-platform protocol. And so commonly you would see a lot of some of the video conferencing that allows you to be able to transfer file from one location to another, like sharing file, would also use server message block. SLP is the service location protocol. This is designed to allow network hosts to find services on other devices such as printing and connection. So with SLP, the devices would then can announce their presence and say, here, look at me, you can use my services, and SLP uses port 427. So on your assignment for number 7, it asks you which protocol replaces CIFS, and that will be your Smb. For question 8, it says, in the network, what consists of two systems? That consists of two systems, iMac Pro 2017 that runs Mac OS, High Sierra, and iMac 2013 running Mac OS 10.9, which is Mavericks. Which protocol will support communication between these systems? So Apple system uses different type of protocol, and you can see the answer there, which is AFP. But when you look into the AFP, which is on page 5, it talks about Apple filing protocol. Apple filing protocol uses port 548. This is a way for the Apple system to communicate. It uses TCP IP to transport. Even though it's labeled as Apple filing protocol, it still uses TCP IP suite. This exists with Mavericks version and newer. Starting with Mac OS 10.9, Mac OS actually use SMB2 to connect. So different versions of Mac OS uses different protocol. So version 10.9 and newer uses AFP, and for the Mac OS that is older than version 10.9, it uses SMB2. This also allows Apple system to be connected to Linux systems and Windows system by using SMB2. The newer Mac OS AFP is used, and it does have backward compatibility, but it is no longer being supported or developed any further. So going back to the question that was asked, we can safely say that for question 8, that will be AFP, Apple Filing Protocol. Another protocol that you now commonly see because of COVID is your remote desktop protocol. This is pertained to Windows systems, could be Windows 10 or Windows Server. It uses port 3389, and it allows the system to utilize the remote desktop services. So you can remotely connect to a system to be able to access its desktop. That could be for maintenance purposes, like fixing something on the configuration of that system, or change the settings, or it could just be accessing the system to be able to pull file. Another protocol that you commonly use every day is your Dhcp, Dynamic Host Control Protocol. It uses this is the protocol is used to assign IP addresses locally. So a system that could be your wireless router at home, or a server that is designated for the DHCP role, can be used to assign IP addresses based on the set range. And that IP address can be used by client system that is connected to that network. So your router at home, its job also is to give you IP addresses within the range. So you might get 192.168.0.11 or .x. That will be the address within the range that most of your wireless network is using. And that address is private to your network inside your home. When the packet is traveling from the router to your internet service provider or other networks, it would then utilize the public IP, which is given to your wireless router by your internet service provider. So all your devices from home would then have a different private IP address that can only be used in that network. And when your device is sending out packets or communication from your router to other networks like the internet, you would then use the public IP. So the Dhcp, its job is to assign local IP addresses to the system, and it would automatically reassign. So when a system is off for a long time, it would take that IP address and assign it to a different system. And we can set it for a lease time, so the expiration for the lease can be a certain number of days. It really depends on the administrator, but by standard, it usually is 90 days. So for Snmp, we talked about Simple Network Management Protocol, which is used to manage and monitor devices on the network. We talked about Ldap, which is Lightweight Directory Access Protocol when we're doing the assignment. And so this concludes my part 1 of the video, which covers the protocol. In the next video, I'll talk about network hardware and devices.